Welcome back to The Heat. We're talking about Hillary Clinton and the big political convention in Philadelphia. We're looking at live pictures from the convention right now. She is expected to be formally selected as the Democratic Party's presidential candidate this week. Let's get back to our panel right now. Atiba, let me start with you. Hillary Clinton really now has to differentiate herself from Donald Trump, and in that she's got her work cut out. I mean, we heard Richard Fowler talk to us just a moment ago about the groups or the constituencies that she will win with, black voters, Latino voters, women. But, when you look at that as a whole in the country, is that going to be enough to compensate for the number of white male votes that Donald Trump is going to get?
Well, the sad thing in this country has been we've had low voter turnout in elections for a long time. This election, we have a reality television star, basically, who's in a race. We don't know what type of voters he's going to pull out. We do know that he has a base that's very excited. With Hillary, I don't see that. I don't feel that there's that same excitement. I felt that if she had picked Elizabeth Warren, that maybe the base would have become more excited. Now she has to go into some swing states without that type of excitement and try to convince independent voters and try to convince voters who were impacted by the economic recession. I mean, we don't talk about how the economy, even though our American economy overall is doing very well, but when you start to look and go deeper into where unemployment is, how many people lost homes during the recession, and we know that globally others felt the same brunt of what we did. But around this country, there are communities of people that still have not recovered, and that anti-establishment piece that they are feeling right now. You mentioned earlier the $160,000 that Tim Kaine did disclose as an executive, but he still, for some, seems to be an establishment person who is tied to the banks. And that narrative that Hillary Clinton now has to talk about, she also may at times also have to explain that part, why she put Tim Kaine on a ticket. Whether or not he's boring or not, he will be tied by his opponent to the banks and to the establishment of people who have made it harder for a certain demographic in this country, not just blacks and Hispanics and women, but of white voters who feel that they've been disenfranchised.
Right, and very quickly, this is just a clarification for our international audience. The U.S. general election, the election for president, is not a conventional general election where the guy with the most votes wins, because this is a state-by-state election. And when we talk about the fact that she may win the votes of, say, Latinos or women or African Americans, in many states, the Democrats are going to win that anyway, aren't they?
And there are some states where the Republicans are going to win.
Right.
So, I mean, to our international audience, if you look at a map, which we'll be showing over the course of this election cycle, you'll see states that are red and states that are blue. Yeah. And there are far less blue states than there are red states. But those red states have less of a population. And so the way that this thing goes is that those states that have the larger population, which are our urban areas, for instance, New York and Florida and Chicago, well, Illinois and Texas, California, those states have a larger number of voters. So if Hillary Clinton wins those states, then she'll win a larger, what we call, of the electoral college. And that's how but when we talk about those swing states, those are the states where they sometimes flip. They could go Democrat, sometimes they go Republican. In terms of the majority of those voters, it's not that we count the majority, those actual votes, we count a smaller number, which equals sometimes 36. Right. Sometimes it depends on how many congressional members we have in those states.
Okay, let's go to Jennifer. Jennifer, when we look at the media in the United States talking about the election, we hear a lot about, the email controversy, Russian spies. We hear about Melania Trump, that's Donald Trump's wife, who made that speech, that she plagiarized parts of that speech. And I'm wondering, to what extent is the media in sync with the American people? The British newspaper, The Guardian, had a great piece just about a week ago in which their reporter actually walked from Detroit to Cleveland, where the Republican convention was taking place, to sound out the opinions of voters. And they said, look, we're really not interested in Melania's plagiarism. What I want to know is, where is the next job coming from? So are politicians sitting in these bubbles totally oblivious of what real people out there are thinking and want?
Well, I think the politicians certainly try to speak to what people care about, right? They set up a platform to deal with different issues, but those are pretty static, right? Once you have a stance on a given issue, it's not changing day to day, or at least we hope, right, the candidates aren't changing day to day. However, the media has a job to report the daily news, and so they're going to cover all the minutia of what's happening on the campaign trail, whether or not those are the primary considerations and concerns of the American public. We know that in general, the economy is always one of the biggest issues during an election cycle, and the extent to which it is waxes and wanes. But at the end of the day, the economy usually has a very big effect on voter considerations, but as does party identification. So at the end of the day, most people do stick with their party, right? Whether or not there is divisiveness in the ranks at the conventions. Usually come November, they coalesce around their party's nominee. And so, to a certain extent, you might say the media is, distracting from the issues that the public cares about, but part of that is because their job is to report day in and day out. And if they're reporting on the same things every day, it would kind of make for boring news.
Right, and they certainly have a lot of time to fill. Mary, Trump has hit very hard on international trade, NAFTA. He's condemned that. That's the North American Free Trade Agreement, which is Mexico, the United States, and Canada. He's also hit very hard against the Trans-Pacific Partnership. He says that these deals cost America jobs and that they've devastated the country's manufacturing base. So how does Hillary Clinton counter those arguments?
Well, yes, it's going to be difficult because, the economy has improved under the President Barack Obama, so he'll be running on his record. She will somehow be running on that too, but people don't feel that because so many jobs and working class jobs have been lost or have been downsized, and people are working many jobs just to try to make it up. And so she and Tim Kaine have been in favor of some of these, although recently she said she is against the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So she'll have to thread that tightrope of saying, yes, we are doing better, but I know that we can do even better. And Donald Trump is flipping the playbook because usually Republicans are pro these trade deals, and he's basically saying, I'm going to throw them out. But he really isn't giving as many specifics. So you will see, particularly in these Rust Belt states, as you were talking about the Electoral College, when you see these presidential elections, they really depend on just a handful of states. So you'll see these candidates going to Ohio and Pennsylvania and states like that, Michigan, to talk about these jobs that were lost and trying to come up with a plan. But definitely Hillary Clinton will have to explain some of her support for these trades, and Donald Trump will have to explain what he's going to do when he says we're going to bring these jobs back, because some of these manufacturing jobs will never come back.
Richard, let's turn to foreign policy. Donald Trump has blamed Hillary Clinton for everything, from her vote for the Iraq war to her policy on Syria, on Libya. How does she change that narrative?
Well, I think you're going to see her slowly start to change that narrative this week when she talks and lays out what her foreign policy will be. I think Joe Biden's speech will be very helpful in that. But beyond that, I think Donald lacked specifics. It's like we're going to get rid of NATO. And of course, people about knowledge whatsoever of foreign policy. Her speech that's very in the globe. See, your audience can see it is students, all the Hillary Clinton, because they understand that it's public education. You need to invest in that. He'll take the position to Donald Trump, who says, "I'm trading anything."
Bothering the Clinton campaign more than voters. Say that how big
trust issue? That's a big problem. But I think that she did a very good job to get to this point. So I'll get quite to this point. Now she's broken that one. But I think the question is in the United States. So look at what happened in Britain with Brexit right here. But I think that also what the second part is, if we do elect it, let's just say Donald Trump. I say that scarily, but if we do elect Donald Trump, what will that do for not just our economy? What is that going to do for the world economy? And will our voters wake up either the next day as they did in Britain, or will they wake up a year or 2 years from now, as Richard just mentioned, in terms of the things that Donald Trump has said that he's going to do without laying out a plan, and realize, oh, wow, we really shot ourselves in the foot by giving this guy a chance, because he doesn't have the same type of experience that Hillary Clinton has. So hopefully over the next few days, we'll hear and people will come to understand why she may be better suited for president, at least on paper. She has the experience, and she's, as the president has said, she's more qualified than anyone else that we've seen in recent days, in recent times, to become president.
The thing is that they both have unfavorable ratings. They do. And if you look at this year, as you point out, this is the year of the anti-establishment insurgency. I mean, she's going to bring in some big names. Her husband, former President Bill Clinton, President Obama is going to be speaking as well. Very quickly, she's bringing in establishment figures. Is that going to backfire on her?
I think the question has to be, how is she, I mean, she tried to roll out her announcement of Tim Kaine to be, but it still shows there is a disconnect. Okay. There is a disconnect because we're following it. Donald Trump doesn't have a script. He's just going off cuff, and people are excited to see, even if you don't like him, you're still watching to see what's he going to do next. So I don't know how she does that. It's going to be difficult if she doesn't figure out how to do something different.
We're going to have to leave it there. Thanks to all of you for joining us.